The day my husband died seemed like any other. Alex kissed me goodbye, his laptop bag over his shoulder, heading out for a business trip to Singapore. "I'll call when I land," he promised. "Love you." Those were the last words I heard from him, or so I thought. I'm Sophie Chin, and at 32, I became a widow, or at least that's what everyone thought, including me. The call came at 3 o'clock a.m. Mark, Alex's best friend and business partner, could barely speak through his tears. The private plane they were on had crashed somewhere over the Pacific. No survivors. I slid down the wall, my legs unable to hold me as everything spun around me. Alex and I had been married for 7 years. We were trying for a baby, and we had plans and dreams for the future. But in an instant, it was all gone. The shock didn't fully get until the next day when I went to the bank. "I'm sorry, Mrs. Chin," the manager said, his face blank. "The accounts were emptied yesterday morning. All transfers were authorized with the correct passwords." I stared at him confused. "That's impossible. My husband died yesterday." He shifted uncomfortably. "According to our records, Mr. Chen authorized these transfers at 9:43 a.m. yesterday before his flight." The numbers on the screen blurred before my eyes. Our savings, our investments, our retirement accounts. Over $3 million. All gone just hours before the crash. I walked out of the bank in shock. My mind couldn't make sense of it. Alex had always handled our finances. He was the successful banker, while I was a kindergarten teacher. I trusted him completely, but now that trust was starting to fall apart. More details came to light. The private plane company had no record of Alex or Mark booking a flight. Our house deed had been transferred to a shell corporation 2 months before. Even our safety deposit box had been emptied. "There must be a mistake," I told the detective. "Alex wouldn't do this." But he did. As the investigation went on, the truth slowly came out. The plane crash never happened. Mark wasn't even in the country when he made that tearful call. Phone records show he was in the Cayman Islands, where millions in cryptocurrency had been moved through untraceable accounts. My husband hadn't died. He planned an elaborate disappearance, taking everything we had. The worst part was how much he planned. Security footage showed Alex visiting a storage facility many times in the weeks before his supposed death. Credit card statements revealed small purchases for camping gear, survival supplies, and burner phones. He'd been preparing for months while still sleeping beside me every night. Our friends were shocked. "He seemed so devoted to you," they said. "You two were perfect together." Were we? Looking back, I started to see the signs I'd missed. The late-night phone calls, the business trips that kept increasing, and him changing passwords and insisting on handling all our finances. I had been blind, trusting him completely. The house went into foreclosure. I moved into a small apartment, taking only what I could prove I bought with my teaching salary. The life insurance company denied my claim because of fraud. Mark disappeared. His phones were disconnected, and his social media was erased. I sank into depression, taking leave from work. I could barely get out of bed. My sister Grace moved in temporarily, forcing me to eat, shower, and keep going when I wanted to disappear, just like Alex had. "He's not worth this," she'd say, holding me through my nightmares. "You're stronger than what he did to you." But I didn't feel strong. I felt empty, like I didn't know anything about love or trust anymore. The kids in my kindergarten class noticed something was wrong with their usually cheerful teacher. "Why are you sad, Miss Chen?" they'd ask, and I'd end up in tears. Months went by, but it all felt like a blur of grief and anger. I went through the motions of life, teaching, paying bills, trying to find some normal. But every night I lay awake, wondering where Alex was, what he was doing with our money, and if any part of our marriage had been real. The police investigation stalled. Without a body, they couldn't prove death or fraud. Tracing the money was almost impossible because Alex had planned his escape so carefully. Grace convinced me to see a therapist, Dr. Martinez, who helped me start to unravel what had happened. In her quiet office, I learned how Alex had manipulated me. He'd showered me with love, grand gestures, and constant attention at the beginning, making me trust him deeply. Dr. Martinez explained how people like Alex study their targets and can mimic emotions without actually feeling them. I remembered our relationship, the way it had seemed too perfect, how quickly Alex wanted to merge our lives. But 7 years? Who could fake that for 7 years? "Sociopaths can," she said gently. "To them, relationships are transactions." They can pretend to feel, but there's nothing real underneath. The truth hit me like acid, burning away my illusions. Alex hadn't loved me. I had been part of his long con, a way to steal from me. Our whole marriage was a lie. 1 year after his death, I filed for divorce on the grounds of abandonment. The paperwork felt final, like closing a book I never wanted to read again. I changed my name back to Sophie Lynn, refusing to keep his name. Grace helped me move to a new apartment, one I chose for myself. I started rebuilding my life. I took financial literacy classes, opened new accounts in my name, and began trusting myself again. But sometimes late at night, I still dreamed of Alex. In my dreams, he was always smiling, that perfect smile that made me feel special. I'd wake up hating myself for missing the man I thought he was. I had no idea that 8 years later, I would see that smile again. I had no idea that when I did, it would be in an airport terminal, thousands of miles from home. The man wearing that smile would be standing with his new family, living a life he'd stolen from me. At LAX, waiting for my flight, I heard a child's laughter. I looked up, and there he was, Alex. He was holding hands with a boy around 6 years old. A woman, pregnant and in expensive yoga wear, leaned against him. They looked like a perfect family. Alex hadn't changed much, just some gray hairs and laugh lines, but still handsome in that polished way that had first attracted me. Then he turned slightly, and our eyes met. I saw his face go pale, and he pulled his family closer, as if I were a threat. His new wife looked confused and stared at me. My hands didn't shake as I pulled out my phone. Years of therapy had prepared me for this moment, though I'd never truly believed it would come. I snapped several clear photos before he could react, then dialed a number I'd memorized long ago. Detective Rivera, remember that case from 8 years ago? I found him. Alex's face shifted from shock to fear. He whispered something to his wife, who quickly gathered the children and walked away. But he stayed, watching me as I spoke to the detective who had never closed my case. When I hung up, Alex cautiously approached. "Sophie," he said softly, his familiar voice sending unwanted shivers down my spine. "Please, I have a family now." "You had a family before," I replied, my voice steady. "Or was I just a convenient mark?" He glanced nervously at the security cameras, then at the people around us. "It wasn't like that. I was in trouble." Alex explained that he owed money to dangerous people and had to disappear to escape them. He stole all our money and made me think he was dead to cover his tracks. He asked if we could talk privately over coffee, but I told him no. I told him to call his lawyer because the FBI was interested in his fraud. He seemed scared and said I was making a mistake, but I stood firm. I told him I was thinking about his kids just like how they deserved to know the truth about their father, and how his wife deserved to know she married a con man. Security officers were coming because I'd called them, and Alex saw them, straightened up, and said, "I'm not the same person I was back then." I told him he was still the same liar and manipulator he always was. He was trying to protect himself again, just like before. The officers approached, and Alex tried to act innocent, saying there was a mistake and that he had a flight to catch. But the officer asked him if he was going by a different name. His new wife was watching, looking confused, but I didn't feel sorry for her. She would soon learn what kind of man Alex really was. The officers took him away, and I knew he was probably calling his lawyers. But it didn't matter. I had everything I needed, proof that he was alive and evidence of his new identity. The police took my statement and confirmed Alex was living under the name Alexander Whitman, running a business in Canada, and living a perfect life with his wife and kids. I felt relief, like I could stop worrying about him. But it wasn't truly over. The case became big news, and Alex's new wife reached out to me through her lawyer. She wanted to meet and understand what had happened. When we met, she was pregnant and crying. She asked if I knew anything about Alex's true intentions. I told her I still didn't understand it myself. She cried, devastated by everything. The legal process took a while, and it turned out that Alex had been running other fraud schemes for years, not just with me. He had stolen over $50 million. He had planned everything, creating fake companies and fake identities. His old friend, who helped him fake his death, was caught and confessed. I testified in court, facing Alex as he stood there in prison clothes. He looked different, smaller, desperate. He tried to explain himself, saying he did it to protect his family. The prosecutor asked him which family, his real family or the one he abandoned. The jury found him guilty of everything, and he was sentenced to 25 years in prison with no chance of parole for 15 years. His wife, Rebecca, divorced him immediately, and we became unlikely friends, helping each other through the mess. His kids would need therapy just like I did, but they were young, and they would heal. They would learn the truth about their dad. The money that was recovered was split among his victims, and I got most of what he stole from me, plus interest and damages. But the real victory wasn't the money. It was knowing that I was finally free of him. 6 months after Alex was sent to prison, I visited him. It wasn't for closure. I had already found that, but to tell him something important. Through the glass, I said, "I forgive you, not for you, but for me. I'm done letting what you did define my life." He looked at me, his usual charm gone. He asked, "How can you forgive me?" I told him, "Because I'm stronger than what you did to me. I always was, you just helped me see it." I stood up to leave but paused. "One more thing," I said. "Rebecca and I are starting a support group for victims of financial fraud. Your story is helping others protect themselves, so in a way, you finally did something good." As I walked out, I got a text from my boyfriend, James, a kind and honest man I met through my school's parent association. The text said, "Proud of you. I'll raid dinner tonight." I smiled, thinking about how long it had taken me to trust again. James had been patient and understanding, knowing my past experiences had built walls around me. That evening at dinner, he proposed. His ring was simple, not like the flashy diamond Alex had used to win me, but James offered something much more valuable: truth, partnership, and a love based on respect, not lies. I said yes, tears of joy replacing the pain I had felt for so long. Later that night, standing on my balcony looking at the city lights, I thought about the young woman I used to be, devastated by betrayal, thinking my life was over. I wished I could tell her that the end of one chapter was just the beginning of something better. My phone buzzed with a text from Rebecca. "Support group meeting tomorrow, 5 new members. We're making a difference." I smiled, thinking about how even the darkest moments in life can lead to light. Alex had tried to destroy me, but instead he helped me find my own strength. His betrayal had led me to help others, to find real love, and to become someone I was proud to be. The next morning, I walked into my school office, where pictures of my students lined the walls. Their trust reminded me why honesty and integrity matter. A news alert popped up on my phone. Another financial fraud case exposed, another family hurt by lies. I added the new victims' contact information to our support group list. Their healing journey had just begun, but they wouldn't walk it alone, because that's what survival teaches you. Your hardest moments can become someone else's hope. Trust can be rebuilt, and real love is worth the risk. Alex would serve his time, his children would grow up, and life would go on. But his greatest legacy wasn't the pain he caused. It was the strength he accidentally gave to those he tried to break. Sometimes, I still dream about seeing him with his new family in the airport, but now those dreams don't hurt. They remind me of how far I've come and what I've built from the ashes of his lies. James and I married in a small ceremony surrounded by real friends and honest love. Rebecca was my maid of honor. In a twist of fate neither of us expected, her children now call me Aunt Sophie, and they're growing up knowing that truth matters more than appearances. Life has a way of coming full circle. 8 years after my world fell apart, I stood in front of our support group, sharing my story one last time before handing the leadership to Rebecca. "Rock bottom," I said, "is where you discover what you're made of. And sometimes the people who try to destroy you end up giving you your greatest strength."